there is a very distinct possibility that the US goes out of Paris Agreement. Yes, Trump probably would slow down everything, but he would not be able to reverse all that has been set into motion. What is expected out of this COP is an agreement on climate finance, $100 billion, which the developed countries are supposed to provide to developing countries.
Hello, viewers. I'm Flora Swai, and today we are speaking to Amitabh Sinha, who's our environment and climate change editor. And he is at Baku, all the way in Baku, Azerbaijan, and he's covering COP29, which is the biggest UN climate change summit. It's been 3 days. Amitabh has been in Baku covering the COP29. So, Amitabh, tell us, first of all, how's the weather in Baku?
It's cold, not very cold. It's roughly the kind of weather that you see in Delhi during winters, around 7-8 degrees. So yesterday there was just a bit of rain, so it has cooled down temperatures further, but it's nothing intolerable.
It's been 3 days, like I told our viewers. You have been in Baku, and a lot has been happening with the kickoff that happened 3 days ago. So, if you had to summarize in, let's say, 3 or 4 key takeaways, what has been happening, if you can give us an overview?
So the first few days, remember this is a 2-week conference. The outcomes usually come towards the end of the conference. So the negotiations have begun. The first 3 days, you would see, especially what happens at COP is there are lots of different kinds of reports that come out. The negotiations have begun, of course. Countries are making they're making their positions known on different things. On the first day, on the opening day, we also saw an early decision, which is not very common. We had seen one decision last year at Dubai COP as well. And again, here on the opening day, we have seen one decision with regard to carbon markets. I would not go into the details of it, mainly because it'll take a lot of time. There are lots and lots of complications and lots of nuances there. But basically, it is one small but important step forward towards the establishment of the carbon market. So that's one definitive thing that has happened. It is a decision. It's a step forward. And rest of the since yesterday, which is since Tuesday, countries have making their country statements. That's a recent segment that has emerged at COP27. It doesn't feed into the negotiations at all, but because there are so many world leaders who attend this COP, here more than 80 heads of state or governments have come. So recently, last few years, a new segment has been started at the COP where the world leaders make country statements about what they are doing to fight climate change. These are mainly statements about their own actions that are being taken. As I said, it doesn't feed into the COP. It is not part of the process. It's almost it's a separate track, but it's important to just galvanize action, and because it also shows the political investment that countries make into this process, and that's why you see so many people coming to the COP. So that's what has happened till now, and we'll see going forward in the next few days. We'll see the negotiations, becoming more and more, taking center stage.
COP29, like we had spoken about earlier, is right at the heels of US presidential elections. Right before you left, we had a sort of a curtain raiser chat on what COP29 is going to be all about. And the first thing that we spoke about was the Trump narrative, given his stance on climate change, which is very widely known. He's someone who denies climate change and considers oil as liquid gold. So, has it really dominated the narrative? What has been the general sense there?
Yes, there has been. Coming into the COP, it was quite clear that the election of Trump would certainly be a major point of discussion, at least in the initial part of the COP, and that has certainly been the case. So everyone you meet here uh, has been talking about Trump's election and the likely impact it would have on the climate process. Now, everyone is aware the last time Trump got elected in 2016, he had been promising all along that he'll pull United States out of Paris Agreement, and he eventually did so. It was left on the next president, Joe Biden, to actually bring back the United States into Paris Agreement 4 years later. And this time, with his election again, his election promise has been that he will withdraw the United States from Paris Agreement, maybe even from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That's the mother agreement on climate. So maybe he takes the United States out of there as well. We will have to wait and see till he takes office in January. But there is a very distinct possibility that the US goes out of Paris Agreement. In fact, uh, the US lead negotiator here was talking on Monday, and he addressed these concerns, and he was quite clear that if uh, that since Trump has made these promises during his election campaign, he said we should better believe what he's saying because he has done it earlier as well. And he did try to reassure the world that, even if the United States goes out of the Paris Agreement once again, there is a lot of climate action that is happening in the United States, which is not going to get reversed. So uh, his point was that, look, you know, the Trump presidency, the 4 years of Trump presidency might just slow down climate action, and that's quite possible. But he won't be able to reverse the momentum that has already been generated. He said climate action, is a largely bipartisan thing in the United States, and a lot of climate action was actually happening in the Republican-ruled states as yet. So it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to actually, stop all that. So he said, yes, Trump probably would slow down everything, but he would not be able to reverse all that has been set into motion. So he was trying to reassure the community here, which is so. I remember, the first time when Trump became president in 2016, I, you know, the conference actually started on the day the election results came, and this was in 2016, and the conference was happening in Marrakesh in Morocco. And you know we actually saw a few people crying because they knew, because Trump had been talking about withdrawing from Paris all along, and there was a huge sense of disappointment. This time, people are prepared, sort of, for the eventuality. It no longer comes as a shock, and they realize that it's a. At the previous time, it came as a surprise. This time, it wasn't a surprise, and I don't think people were that disappointed. Probably, uh, they were much better prepared for a Trump presidency again.
Amitabh, last time you had mentioned that the theme of this time's COP29 is all about climate financing. What has been the progress on that front so far?
Right. So climate finance, what is expected out of this COP is an agreement on climate finance, a comprehensive agreement on climate finance that will have lots of elements of the idea is to increase the availability of finance that is directed towards climate action. Currently, the only figure that is available, the only one figure that is often been talked about is $100 billion, which the developed countries are supposed to provide to developing countries. That they are obligated to provide that. Uh, Now that figure, uh, that is only one kind of finance which the which has to flow from the developed countries to the developing countries. But there are lots of other financial requirements. uh, you know every climate action would require lots of money, and the idea here is to not just talk about one figure, but talk about a complete package on climate finance. And the figure that is being talked about is usually in at least $1 trillion every year, right? So that's the quantum of money that is being talked about. That is the expectation that is that the final outcome from COP29 here would would agree on mobilizing at least $1 trillion every year in climate finance. How do you classify what is climate finance? What about transparency? Those kind of things. Should more countries be asked to contribute to this fund? As of now, most of the climate finance is supposed to come out of developed countries, parties, or at least they are the only ones who are responsible for mobilizing this money. So, should more countries know, uh, be asked to join this effort? So these kind of questions, these kind of issues need to be addressed in the finance agreement that is expected to come out of here. And those questions, as of now, are still open. When we had come into this conference, there was, uh, a pre-conference draft on finance agreement that was, prepared a few weeks before this conference began. And yesterday, the developing countries, they rejected that draft, saying, no, this is not a good basis for negotiation because it doesn't contain all the elements that we want there to be in this. So after that got rejected, there is a new draft agreement that emerged today. It has different options of all the countries, and this will be the basis for negotiations in the next uh, no few days that we'll see. And this will culminate into the final outcome at the end of the conference. So it's just right now, it's all options on the table. The negotiations have just begun on what should be the structure of this new finance agreement.
Absolutely. Amitabh, why do you think, because you have written a kind of an in-depth article on it, and our viewers can move on to indianexpress.com to read it. Why do you think India and China have pushed against climate change related trade measures at the COP29?
Okay, so that was another thing that happened, on the opening day. China, India, Brazil, and South Africa, which together are called basic countries, they put forward a proposal saying, you know, some trade measures, and they were pointing mainly to what is called a CBAM in the European Union. And again, we won't be able to go into the details of what exactly is it, but uh, what has happened is the European Union has decided to impose a tax on all imported goods which have an emissions footprint which is uh, you know uh, uh, more than what similar goods produced within European Union have. So basically, if if they are importing steel, for example, from say India, and if during the production of steel in India, the emissions are higher than what uh, a steel production unit in Europe uh, would be generating, then in that case, the steel coming in from India would be taxed by EU. So it's called CBAM. It's called Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So uh, it's a trade sort of measure that EU has introduced, and developing countries are actually not quite happy about it, mainly because they see it as a trade barrier, uh, and they see it as something that violates the provisions of lots of international regulations, including WTO regulations, including the climate change architecture that is there. So they find it violative of lots of you know agreed international arrangements that are in place. And what China uh, and other countries, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa, what they were trying to do is they said this particular issue should be discussed within COP, and it should be put on the agenda of COP. And that is what their request was on the opening day. That issue has not been settled, but as of now, it has been, uh, it has been sent for further consultations with the, you know, presidency, which is the host country, and it will be resolved at a later stage. So right now, it has been put on the back burner, but it is an issue that is likely to come back again and again, because that's something uh, that concerns a lot of developing countries. Because what happens is, when you start taxing imported goods into the EU, the goods of developing countries, they become uncompetitive price wise, and it hurts their exports to these markets very badly. So it is something that they are very, very concerned about, and probably it'll come up again and again.
You have also written quite extensively about the small victories, as there were a lot of countries that approved new carbon market rules and standards. So can you throw a little bit of light on there?
See, carbon markets is a huge, uh, complicated, very technical area of climate change negotiations. Basically, what is being sought to be done is establish an international carbon market. And the way carbon market works is, supposing you have certain emission standards to follow, and if you do more than what is required of you, then you earn carbon credits. And those carbon credits, you can sell it to me if I'm not following the same emission standards, or if I'm failing to follow the emission standards. Then there is a deficit on my side, and you have credits. So I can buy those credits to meet my uh, you know emission standards. So that's how it's an exchange of money. It's you there is the carbon market actually allows for trading in carbon. It can happen in lots of different ways, and it's a complicated structure that has to be put into place. This has existed earlier also. It used to be called a CDM mechanism under Kyoto Protocol, and now a new carbon market is supposed to be set up under Paris Agreement. Now, as I said, it's a very complicated sort of uh, structure that has to be put in place, because of which carbon market is now the last thing in the Paris Agreement, which is yet to be implemented. Remember, Paris Agreement came into force in 2016. It was
Correct.
negotiated in 2015. It came into force in 2016, and the rules were notified. The rules, as in how this is going to be implemented, that were finalized in the subsequent years. By 2020, 2021, almost all aspect of Paris Agreement have gone under implementation, except for carbon markets. That's because there are lots and lots of complications that are still remain to be resolved. So, as I said, in the answer to the first question, there has been a small step forward in towards that direction. One particular thing that was pending for last 2 years, that has been approved on the first day of the conference. It's a small step forward, but there are several other steps that still remain to be taken before the carbon markets actually become a reality. So that's why it's a small step forward, but it's definitely some progress.
Absolutely. Amitabh, we'll keep talking to you now that Express is at COP29 in Baku. We shall
Sure.
keep discussing about what are the highlights, what are the key takeaways, what are the key decisions that are being taken. Up until then, viewers, you can read all of Amitabh Sinha's articles on COP29, Express at COP29, on our website, indianexpress.com. And of course, we'll also share updates on the official YouTube channel of the Indian Express. Amitabh, thank you for talking to us.